Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou ngā manahiri, no mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui topa a te atua, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. You are welcome here, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background. You're welcome here to join us as we proclaim worth in our spiritual journey. You are welcome to join us as we sing songs that uplift our very being, or in our case, hear songs. You are welcome to join us in community as we learn, live, and love together. We are welcome. All are welcome as we worship that which gives us each meaning and value. No matter what you call this hour or this gathering of people, we worship as one body, illuminated by the light of the chalice. My opening words are by my dog Waldo's namesake, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's entitled, "A Person Will Worship Something." A person will worship something. Have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and character. Therefore, it behooves us, good 19th century word, it behooves us to be careful what we worship. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming. And now we're gathering, so we'll listen to a song called "We Are Gathered." If you have your candle or chalice, it's time to light it. As we approach our annual general meeting following worship, let us remember we are doing the work of the congregation. When we do the work of this beloved community, we touch lives. When we touch lives, we change the world. May the memory of this chalice flame we now kindle remind us throughout our meeting of our ministry and our mission. We have listened to a song written by my muse before, but I found a new one that seemed appropriate for today called "Great Spirit's Hand." Paul? What many of us may not be aware of is that it took many years for the Unitarians and Universalists to figure out they belonged together. But they never could quite get there. And there was a woman by the name of Sophia Leon Foss. She was a religious educator. And what brought the two together finally is she worked with the youth of the Universalists and the youth of the Unitarians, and they did common things together, and eventually the parents followed along. And in the early 60s, the two denominations finally became one. So to honor her, and because it fits with what I'm thinking about these days, today, is a reading called "It Matters What We Believe." Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities. Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. My musing for today, I've entitled Outed as a Unitarian. No one was more surprised than I when moving to New Zealand that I would put my Anglican collar back on after 8 years with the American Unitarian Universalists. I did impose one condition on myself before doing so. I would no longer dance around my progressive religious views in the pulpit. Traditionalists and conservatives be damned. It was time to stand up for my beliefs. Yet, a lot had changed. My sermons were not just on a table at the back of the church gathering dust, but on the internet for all to see. They still are, and may always be. I think of them as my afterlife. Taking a position at St. Matthew in the city had already made me suspect in the eyes of traditionalists and conservatives. I was about as popular as a skunk at a garden party after my first billboard to go viral globally drew attention to my views on TV, radio, the press, and blogs. My notoriety gave me few friends throughout the country. My hate mail and death threats increased dramatically. I gained no popularity when one of my conservative colleagues did some deep dumpster diving on the internet, discovered my Unitarian connections, and outed me on his blog. I presume he hoped to squash me and my progressive heresies before I could infect his beloved faith. But he forgot two things. First, few in New Zealand know what a Unitarian is. Second, he thought publicly shaming me by outing me was well-deserved. He was right about the first. I was a Unitarian in an Anglican collar. Hardly the first, I might add. But he couldn't have been more wrong about the second. Unitarianism validated my ever-evolving theological perspective. I found hope in a faith community, willing to take risks to make the world better. I felt no shame, just liberation. One of the things I love about history is how the stories get repeated, whether you remember them or not. My outing is a story that I first found told in what Meg Barnhouse described in a sermon as the battle for Harvard. It's an account of the birth of American Unitarianism as an organized denomination. It took place in 1805 in the hallowed halls of Harvard University. In 1803, the man who had been the Hollis Professor of Divinity died, leaving the post open. The divinity professor trained ministers, there being no divinity school before this. At Harvard, the Hollis Professor of Divinity had been a moderate Calvinist. I'm sure you'd all know lots about John Calvin, but I'll give you a brief update or synopsis. John Calvin in the 1550s revived the theological ideas of Augustine of Hippo, who was a bishop in the early 400s. Tulip, the flower, tulip, is the mnemonic device by which students remember Calvinist beliefs. T is for total depravity of human nature. U is for unconditional election of the saints. L is for limited atonement. I is for irresistible grace of God. And P is perseverance of the saints. You might need a little brush up on what those all mean. Total depravity of human nature, the belief that humans are bent. We choose to do destructive things more easily than we choose to do good. We are inclined to choose selfishly. It is mainly fear of punishment that keeps us on the straight and narrow. Unconditional election of saints. God chose to save some from the beginning of time. It follows that those not selected were damned to eternal punishment. Limited atonement. Jesus died to save only the chosen, not those who weren't. Irresistible grace. If God chooses you to be among the saved, you bloody well will be, because God wills it. Perseverance of the saints. Once saved, always saved. You can struggle, but God will not let you go. In a nutshell, that is traditional Calvinism. For 100 years in New England, that was the only flavor of Christianity taught in churches. That is what counted as orthodoxy, which literally means right belief. The society in New England was pretty homogeneous. Most of the citizens of Massachusetts were Congregational Calvinists and did not object that tax money paid their ministers' salaries. This arrangement was called the Standing Order and had been in effect since the Puritans. By 1805, congregational ministers varied in their theology. Some were strict Calvinists, others were more moderate Calvinists. Some had become liberals. Liberals did not believe or preach the doctrines of Calvinism. They had begun to think that God had created good human beings. They did not see God as demanding blood to forgive sins. Jesus saved us by his teachings and awakening the mind and heart, not by his death on the cross. Entering the battle for Harvard came a strict Calvinist named Jedediah Morse, a new arrival to Massachusetts. He was amazed and probably appalled that the liberals and Calvinists got along so well together. He thought ministers should take a stand, be counted, and be labeled by where they stood on tulip. Morse began hinting that the liberals were tainted with the Unitarianism preached in England. Those Unitarians were preaching that Jesus was just a man, possessing no divinity. Morse was troubled that the lack of controversy came from differences not being voiced or pointed out. People were being too polite, and it was getting in the way of knowing who was who could be trusted to preach correct doctrine, and who could not. Before the controversy of 1805, most liberal preachers avoided preaching their opposition to Calvinist theology from the pulpit to avoid controversy and keep peace in the congregations. They did what many liberal preachers do today, and I have done in the past. They just preached around the objectionable doctrines, choosing to preach instead about social responsibility, ethical behavior, and God's loving kindness. At the ministerial meetings, they avoided speaking of their liberal beliefs. No one claimed they were strict, moderate, or liberal. The ministers in the association were in the habit of pulpit exchanges. A minister could be in his own pulpit about half the time. For the other half, he would preach at other churches. It granted relief to the congregations. They heard different voices and other points of view. I bet you wish you had that here at Auckland Unitarians. It also provided relief to the ministers, who had to write fewer sermons since they could repeat their better ones when they visited another pulpit. The standing order of tax-supported worship and the pulpit exchanges were what gave what happened at Harvard the importance it had. The Hollis professor who died and left his chair vacant was a moderate and well-respected Calvinist. He got along with both liberals and conservatives. Here's where academic politics comes into the story. The president of Harvard procrastinated in suggesting a candidate because the most obvious candidate was a liberal Boston minister named Henry Ware. And the president was a Calvinist. He didn't want the controversy. The president just never brought up the subject of a replacement at meetings of the Harvard Corporation. And for 2 years, the post was left vacant. By 1805, due to growing pressure, they had to find a candidate soon. The president chose to exit the fray by dying. A professor named Eliphalet Pearson took over as acting president and was widely understood to want the permanent job very badly. People at the time characterized him as an ultra-liberal before the president's death and a staunch Calvinist after. Pearson and 5 other men made up the corporation that governed the university. There was one other staunch Calvinist, 2 liberals, and 2 moderates. The selection process began with each man in the corporation writing down two names. The two Calvinists each wrote down the name of two Calvinist candidates. The two liberals each wrote down the names of two liberal candidates. And the two moderates each wrote down the name of one Calvinist and one liberal candidate. The choice came down to two, a moderate Calvinist and Henry Ware. Finally, several months later, Henry Ware was elected by one vote. There was no candidate settled on for president. The appointment then went to be okayed by the Board of Overseers of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Calvinists were understandably distressed that the professor of divinity would not be Orthodox, fearing all the ministers that would come out of Harvard would now be Unitarian. The only point open for discussion was whether Ware fit the stipulations of the Hollis Grant. Jedediah Morse, an ally of Eliphalet Pearson, saw this as an opportunity to show the people how sneaky and deceitful the liberals were, not wanting to declare their position. Here was a chance to cross-examine and bring their Unitarianism to light. With 45 of the 47 members of the board present, he attacked. What procedure had the corporation followed to satisfy itself that Ware's views were in accord with the terms of Thomas Hollis's gift? Hollis had written that the professor should be a man of solid learning in divinity, of sound and orthodox principles. This man doesn't fit. He will not adhere to the Calvinist Westminster Confession. Hollis was not a Unitarian, and he would never have countenanced the election of a man who had departed from sound doctrines. The liberals' position was that Hollis, as a Baptist, had already departed from the Westminster Confession, whose doctrines the Baptists did not believe. Baptists believed in Jesus' death being for everyone. Hollis himself had written that the only article of belief to be required of his professor should be that. The Bible was the only and most perfect rule for faith and practice, and that it should be interpreted according to the best light that God shall give him. The election of Ware was no breach of trust, as Morse and Pearson were accusing, but was in keeping with Hollis's intent. Ware was elected. Within a matter of weeks, Morse had written and published a pamphlet complaining about the election of Ware. When Harvard chose another liberal to be president, Eliphalet Pearson resigned. And within 3 years, Harvard Divinity School was founded. At Morse's urging, the ministers of the Standing Order started organizing. Trinitarian Orthodox congregations established their own associations, refusing to exchange pulpits with liberals, accusing them of Unitarianism. Jedediah Morse in 1815 published a pamphlet called American Unitarianism, accusing the liberals of, believing what they did believe. The Standing Order broke down as the congregational churches split into Orthodox Trinitarian and liberal churches. The liberals increasingly felt pressure to defend themselves against charges of English Unitarianism. Unitarians did, however, describe their view of the oneness of God. And finally, in 1819, in Baltimore, William Ellery Channing preached the sermon that was the manifesto of American Unitarianism. He asked why God would create us with free will and then punish us for using it. Why he, as a supposedly loving father, would choose some of his children to go to eternal damnation. Weren't his listeners all better parents than that? Why should we be better parents than God? Our task from the beginning has been to define ourselves other than as against different faith perspectives. We still struggle with that. Many Unitarian Universalists are most comfortable saying what we don't believe. At the beginning of our movement, the Orthodox outed us with their attacks. We still have a legacy of hiding, not wanting to make a fuss, and not being right out there with our faith. Shortly, we will hold our annual general meeting. It's an excellent time to fuss about what we hold essential to our faith. We can only hope to be outed and proud of it. I've played our closing song for you before, but it's fun and it's appropriate for an annual general meeting Sunday. And I particularly like it because there are several versions of it, but this is the only one that comes from a congregation in Utah, where it is in a state that is predominantly Mormon and conservative. It isn't easy to be Unitarian. I hope that brightens your day, warmed you up for the AGM. My closing words for today. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace, seeking justice. I mean go in peace, committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace. And now it's time to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts during our annual general meeting.